All right, ladies and gentlemen, this evening we're doing Thanksgiving sides. Now, everyone remembers who was here last week how much trouble that front burner gave me. So I went ahead and I started my sweet potatoes early, just because, for those new folks here, these burners and this oven are the most cantankerous pieces of equipment you've ever seen in your life. One day they work wonderfully, the next day they just forget to show up for work. So, first recipe we're working on this evening is our sweet potatoes. We're going to take sweet potatoes, sugar, and a little bit of water. We put them in this pot and we started boiling them. You want to cook them until they're soft, and you cannot cook them too soft, okay? The more soft you cook them, the less mixing you're going to have to do later, so by all means, boil away, okay? For those of you who aren't overly familiar with sweet potatoes, I saved a few. They have two types. There's an orange sweet potato and there's a white sweet potato. There's not a whole lot of difference in them. They're both relatively sweet. They cook about the same time. They just have the different color. One's a little bit lighter, one's a little darker. For peeling them and cutting them, okay, if anybody's ever tried to peel sweet potatoes, they are about 5 times harder to peel than a standard potato because they have the skin. Okay, but you can still do it with a normal peeler. And the easiest and the safest way to do it is to run your peeler from your hands down towards the cutting board. Because the skin is so tough, if you pull towards you, there's a pretty good chance you're going to slip, and once you slip, everybody knows that's how you get cuts. So keep your potato down and slice down towards your board, okay? Now when you're cutting these, it takes a little bit more force than a regular potato because they have a little bit more starch to them, a little bit different consistency. I'll leave it up here so you can see, but you basically, depending on how much time you have, you want to cut them in quarters, and then from there slice them down and across. The faster you want them to cook, the skinnier you need to slice them, okay? If you need them to cook quick, slice them like this. If you're going to cook them all day, you can make them as large as you want, if you have all day. Now, I'm not going to add those to the pot because these have been boiling for a while, and then we're going to end up with raw, chunky potatoes in our potatoes, and we don't want that. Once this gets done, we're going to puree it with a mixer. We're going to add half a bag of marshmallows, half our brown sugar, which is about 3 ounces, I'm sorry, and a half stick of butter. We're going to mix all that together. Once that mixes, we're going to put it in a baking dish, and we're going to top it with the rest of our brown sugar, marshmallows, and pecans, and we're going to bake it in the oven, okay? I told you with our sweet potatoes, once we mash them, we're going to add our marshmallows, brown sugar, and butter. Now, you could very well throw a whole stick of butter in there and it would work. But if you simply slice it down a little bit, it'll help dissolve. It'll also help blend into your product a lot better. You can add them, stir, add them, stir, add them, stir, and it helps mix it all up. And this is softened butter. It's been out for about an hour. Again, I always, when I'm cooking, leave my eggs and my butter out for at least an hour before I go to use them. With your butter, it makes it so much easier when it's soft, okay, to melt into things, to dissolve into things. And when you're trying to melt it to cook with, it helps when it's already softened. With eggs, if you leave them out for about an hour beforehand, they come out of the shells almost instantly. You don't have to fight with it. Have you ever had an egg that's really cold and you crack it and the yolk comes out and it seems like it's 2 hours later before all the whites run out? That's usually because it's really cold. If you let them sit out half hour, 45 minutes, even up to an hour, when you crack that egg and you open it up, all the white will come out very quickly. Okay, so you don't have to stand there and fight with it quite so much. We're going to shut these off because I can take one of these and real simply with a spoon press down and they smash. So we know that's pasty and ready. And we'll just let that simmer till it finishes. I took my sweet potatoes, I peeled them, diced them, just covered them in water, added about 4 ounces of sugar to the water, and then boiled them in that. By adding the sugar to the water, as it boils, as the potatoes soften, the water goes in, it also takes some of the sugar, makes them a little bit sweeter. Okay? Now what we're going to do is take it off our heat and we're going to strain it. And I'm going to try and do this in this glass bowl so you can actually see what I'm doing. Now with this, you want to get almost all the water out of it, okay? A little bit's not going to hurt it. You kind of want just a tiny bit in there because that little bit will help make it mash a little quicker, a little simpler. They should all just about fit. We'll make a mess, don't worry. What's the fun if you're not going to make a mess? That's why I sat them there. It's low reliability. Now, if you keep it slow, it shouldn't be too bad. Okay? And it should sink down in the bowl the more you mash it. I didn't even wear any. So, ha. All right, brown sugar. With brown sugar, who knows what we have to do with it before we add it in here? Pour it into your hand first and kind of run it through your fingers. You're always going to have that one rock hard solid piece in there. It just makes it a lot easier to break up if you do it beforehand, okay? Or eat it, which is what I do most of the time at home. And our butter. Now with our butter, like I said, when you cut it and it's already been softened, you can spread it out a little bit. The more you spread it out, the easier it'll be to mix and easier it'll be to stir in and blend into your potatoes. If you had one big stick, you have to basically stir a little bit, wait for it to melt, stir a little bit, wait for it to melt. Only Jess. See what happens when you don't pay attention and you read emails, you get caught. We'll add the rest of our butter. Oh no. Okay, now for our marshmallows. Again, we're going to add about half of our marshmallows. Everybody knows how I measure. It's not science. I refuse to get a bigger bowl. Now, as I'm doing this, you can actually hear the marshmallows starting to melt, okay? They make a very distinct... Seriously, come here. Logan, come here. Come closer. Can you hear it sizzling? Okay. I'm not crazy. Well, I am crazy, but not at this point in time. Now, you don't necessarily want these to melt completely down. They don't have to. If you want to stir them for 3 days, by all means. But you want them to start to soften, and that'll kind of give it that fluff texture, that fluff consistency, which you could, by the way, substitute if you didn't want to stir in marshmallows. Everybody knows what fluff is, right? Fluff and peanut butter with bananas? Okay. As long as I'm not the only crazy one. All right, we get that all melted down. We do still have a tiny bit of butter chunks, and we do still have our marshmallows that are there. But as we cook it, that will all be taken care of. Now, we're going to pour this in our casserole pan, our baking pan. This is closer to the 9x13 you were talking to. But again, it says aluminum sides, so it should help it go a little quicker. Now, we just took this out of boiling water, so we're really not trying to cook it. All we're going to try and do is get the rest of our brown sugar and our marshmallows and our pecans to kind of crispen up a little bit. Now I'm going to go marshmallows first. And if you don't use them all, that's fine. It's wintertime, there's hot chocolate coming, I'm sure. But you want to make sure that it's pretty well covered. Now for our pecans. Is anyone not capable of eating pecans? Everyone can eat them? Fabulous. Notice how I didn't ask if anyone didn't like them. Now, they're chopped, they're very small. You could use whole. I like the chopped simply for the fact that they're a little bit easier to chew. You don't have to have that one big bite. And they spread out a whole lot more even. The bigger ones, you have to cover it with a whole lot more pieces. The smaller ones, they just break up a little easier, a little bit simpler to work with. Now, we're going to go back over this, and we're going to put the rest of our brown sugar over the top of the whole thing. And what that should do is as our brown sugar starts to melt, it'll kind of bake down through the pecans and it'll bake down through the marshmallows. It'll help your marshmallows melt and it'll make the pecans a little bit sweeter, as well as making our sweet potatoes sweeter. Toasted. But that's just me personally. Toasted coconut has a much sweeter flavor to it, and I just like it a little bit better. With this one, I'm going to be a tiny bit preventive because I have an odd feeling it's going to boil out. So we're simply going to set it on a cookie sheet. Our oven's already preheated, and I don't think you can see on camera overhead, but our brown sugar is already starting to melt around the edges, and it's kind of starting to seep and puddle and pool. That's what we're looking for. Our stuffing's starting to get dry on top, and basically it'll dry on top, and then once it dries, it'll start to brown. And that's what we're looking for. Now with this, the brown sugar just started to melt a little bit, and you can see it bubbling and boiling around the edges. The marshmallows around the edges have melted, and the ones in the center have kind of plumped up and gotten bigger. By all means, leave it in there longer. Okay? I like it right about this way because as you cut through those marshmallows, they're going to kind of become stringy and they're going to mix and they're going to stir together really well for it. So I'm going to take this to the back.
So there was no liquid in there, right?
No.
Just the potatoes.
Just the potatoes and the brown sugar. You going to carry it for me, Jess? I'm leaving those towels for you because that is very hot. I'm going to take this one to the back and we're going to check our stuffing one more time and I think it'll be ready. It's hot.